Welcome to the Airgun Show. This week I'm taking a look at a very interesting edition of the Weihrauch HW97 KT. But before that, I'm back out after the rabbits. Right, I'm out rabbit shooting again on the same farm as we were at a couple of weeks ago. We had a pretty good evening back then. There are actually a lot of rabbits on this farm this year, so I'm hoping we'll manage to bag a few more this evening. Now, last time I was shooting prone from the support of a bipod, and I'm going to use pretty similar tactics this evening, but the last session I was using a top-end gun, and what I want to do tonight is just to prove that you don't have to have the most expensive kit to make this kind of setup work. So I'm using the Zbroia Hortitsia, which I regard as a relatively affordable air gun. This one's 177 caliber, sub 12 foot-pounds. I've changed from my usual scope this evening. I've got on the MTC Mamba light. The main reason for that being is because the illuminated reticle dial on this scope is on the turret rather than on the eye bell. It's a lot easier for me to slip my scope cam on, so it just makes that more straightforward. And I also really like the fact that this scope's got a nice fine reticle as well, which really helps with precise aiming. And that's held on with my usual sports match scope mounts, which are generally my first choice for a nice secure setup. In terms of conditions, it really couldn't be much better. We've got a nice still evening, so there's not too much of a breeze to contend with. And also it's just stopped raining, and that tends to soften up the grass, which encourages the rabbits to come out and feed. So I'm feeling pretty optimistic. So what I'm going to do now is get myself settled in. Hopefully we'll bag a few. Right, well, I've got myself sprawled out. Rabbits here are pretty bold, so I'm not even going to bother with a head net, certainly to start with. If they do seem to be a bit spooky, I'll pop one on. Sort of keeping with the theme of trying to keep it affordable, I'm not even using a bipod this evening. I'm still shooting prone and I still want that stability, but all I've got here is my beanbag seat just to give the gun that bit of added support. Now, I'm targeting the same area as I was last time, but I've moved to a slightly different position. So that means that in a moment I'm just going to range find again because things have shifted slightly because I'm shooting from a different spot. But again, you don't have to have a laser rangefinder. If you don't have one, you could quite easily pace out distances. I pick obvious markers like fence posts, trees, cattle troughs, things like that. And I would usually ping that with my rangefinder. But you could pace out the distance from those markers to where you're shooting from, and you would get just as accurate a range reading from doing that. The only thing I would recommend is that you do that sometime prior to when you plan to shoot, because if you're stomping around over the burrows, it could make the rabbits very reluctant to emerge for a while after that disturbance. But ultimately, the range finding is going to be exactly the same. So I'm simply pinging the range to 4 or 5 distinctive markers close to the rabbit burrows. Knowing the distance to these points will enable me to make correct holdover and hold under adjustment without having to reach for the rangefinder again. I've done pretty much all I can to make myself ready now. It's just a matter of being patient and waiting for the rabbits to come back out. As expected, The bunnies are keen to venture out and feed, and it's not long before I get my first chance to bag one. Well, that was a nice straightforward shot to kick off with. Wasn't much more than 20 metres away, so I just gave it a tiny amount of hold under, and that's a really nice clean headshot to get us off the mark. The rabbit was cleanly killed, so I'm leaving it where it is. Stomping over to pick it up would only put others on alert. And another one. That one was very close to where I shot the first one. Same sort of range, so again, just a little bit of hold under. Now you'll probably see in the footage that there was a fine stem in the way. And it looked like the pellet actually struck it. Now, if it was more substantial, or if it had been closer to me, I would have left that shot because it would have been far more likely to have deflected the pellet off of aim. But as it was, I'm sure the footage will clearly demonstrate that pellet struck exactly where it needed to. There's another really good clean kill. I've already shot a lot of rabbits on this holding this summer, but there are clearly plenty more to be had. Once again, that's more or less the same spot, and that one takes us up to 3. Now, the fact that there are so many rabbits concentrated in such a relatively small area just goes to show how many there could well be on this holding, and the potential that they have to cause damage, not only through munching away through this grass crop, but also through their digging and the threat that the holes that they therefore make pose to the livestock that will be grazing in these fields. It's gone well so far, but I reckon we could still get more from here, so I'm not moving on just yet. And sure enough, another rabbit eventually creeps out. This one's a bit further away, but it's still within range. That one was a bit further away, about 35 metres, which made it pretty much smack on zero. Now, I gave it a couple of squeaks just to try to get it to sit up and present me with a clearer target. Eventually put the pellet straight into the back of its head, absolutely walloped it over. All good things must come to an end, and after a long lull in the action, it feels like we've had our lot from this spot. Right, it's been pretty quiet for the last half an hour or so, and as is often the case when I'm shooting prone like this, I'm starting to get uncomfortable. I'm getting pins and needles, and I just want to stretch my legs. And it seems like I've got another pretty good excuse this evening as well. It just stopped raining when we arrived, and we can just feel it starting to spot again. So we're going to leg it before we get absolutely drenched, get these rabbits picked up and head for home. But I hope that what I have managed to do in the short time that we've been out here is prove that you don't have to have the absolute top end kit to snipe rabbits from an ambush like this. Instead of a bipod, as I said at the outset, I'm using my beanbag seat. Instead of a top end airgun, I'm using the relatively affordable PCP, the Zbroia Hortitsia, which is nonetheless still a fantastic little performer. So get out there and give it a go. Another enjoyable evening bringing grass gobbling bunnies to book there. And now it's the Airgun Show news.
This is the Airgun Show news. Good news for FAC airgunners, firearms licence fees won't be going up this year. The Home Office had planned to carry out a review of the fee structure, but it now says it won't because of delays in implementing the online licensing system and the need to review arrangements for police medical checks with applicants' GPs. BASC said this was the right and proper course of action. The Environment Secretary, Michael Gove, has taken charge of the general licensing situation. Natural England ceded its decision-making power to the Minister after chaos reigned for nearly 3 weeks when the licences were revoked. Shooting organisations have asked Gove to issue replacement licences as soon as possible, make them easy to understand, and to remove the requirement to demonstrate that alternative methods have been tried. Brits might still be able to use the European Firearms Pass after Brexit. The government has now said it's aiming to keep our access to the EFP, which allows shooters to travel across Europe with firearms legally. It still depends on the government agreeing a Brexit deal, but if it happens it'll work both ways, allowing visiting hunters to travel to the UK easily too. And finally, don't forget to pick up issue 122 of Airgun Shooter while it's still in the shops. If you want to get your mates into airgunning, this is the issue for you. It's got a full beginner's guide to the sport, from types of shooting to gun selection and more. Plus, there are tests of the Air Arms Ultimate Sporter R, Hawk Air Max Compact, Lee Enfield CO2 rifle, and 5 red dots. It's also packed with bonus gifts. Don't miss it. That was the Airgun Show news.
German gunmaker Weihrauch has a reputation for making some very fine spring-powered airguns, and we've got one of its best on the bench this week. It's the HW97 KT Synthetic Stainless. This quality break barrel underlever, distributed in the UK by Hull Cartridge, has a recommended retail price of £483. The synthetic in this gun's name refers to the synthetic stock, which is finished in black and is very tough. The long forend is adorned with patches of grippy stippling, as is the pistol grip. The stock is of a thumbhole design with a relatively steep pistol grip, which is really comfortable and makes for good trigger attack. The cheek piece is nice and high, which makes it perfect for scope use. In fact, you could certainly get away with higher mounts than the ones I'm using here. The butt pad is relatively basic and quite hard, but it does its job, and I didn't really find myself wanting for anything softer because this gun actually has very little felt recoil. Measuring 101 centimetres in length in this carbine format, I would say this is still an adult-sized airgun. Apart from being very tough, the synthetic stock also helps to shave a bit of weight off, although this gun still tips the scales at a fairly hefty 4 kilos without a scope fitted. I did initially think it felt a little front heavy to start with. However, the well-designed ambidextrous stock makes for very good gun fit, and I did find it comfortable to shoot from a variety of stances. Weihrauch airguns are renowned for their brilliant build quality, and that is certainly the case with this one. It looks and feels to be very well engineered. This is the stainless version, so most of the metalwork has a distinctive stainless finish. That may make it a little bit conspicuous in some hunting situations, but it still makes for a very handsome airgun. There are no open sights on the HW97, but the 30cm barrel does feature a muzzle brake. That doesn't have the stainless finish, but I still think it works, and it means that standard finish scope mounts don't look out of place. The dovetail scope rails are nice and long, and they feature 3 recesses to accept a recoil pin to ensure that there's no creep. The HW97 is a full power airgun, and the .22 caliber test gun is punching out a consistent 11.5 foot-pounds. Because of that, and because of the relatively short cocking lever, it does take a fair amount of effort to cock, although it is a very smooth stroke. You free the cocking lever by pressing down the button at the front of the retainer, then pull it down until it locks into place with a very positive click. You're now ready to load a pellet direct to the breech. It probably looks a bit fiddly, but it's actually very straightforward once you get the knack, and it's assisted by a fairly large cutaway. Once you've loaded up, swing the underlever back up until it clicks into the retainer and you're good to go. The downward stroke of the cocking lever also engages the auto safety, which is positioned at the rear of the cylinder. The gun is safe when the button on the left is in the outward position. Thumb it in and the gun's ready to shoot. Weihrauch's Record trigger unit has become legendary, and that's because it's excellent. It's a 2-stage unit that's very easy to adjust, and it features a distinctly curved blade with a nice flat front edge. Straight out of the box, this one has a fair amount of travel in the first stage before it comes to a distinct stop. The second stage then breaks cleanly and predictably with absolutely no creep. So the Weihrauch HW97 KT synthetic stainless is clearly a very well appointed spring gun. I'm now going to take it out onto the range so I can show you what it shoots like. Well, how about that? I really don't think I could have placed that first pellet any better if I'd put it there by hand. Now, obviously it's a fixed barrel gun. No doubt that improves accuracy because you know that barrel's never moving, but also because of that, it really does breed confidence. And also, having such a nice predictable trigger unit really does help with precise shooting, and it also makes it much more enjoyable to shoot. The firing cycle, fairly fast, fairly smooth and you don't get that reverberation that you get with a lot of spring guns, so you maintain the sight picture during and after the shot. It doesn't get shaken out of view. Now, I usually test PCPs at 30 metres, but I'll be honest with you, I've pulled the target into 25 metres today because I'm not a great shot with a spring gun, and I just really wanted to be able to do this gun justice and show you what it is capable of. And the .22 caliber test gun has churned out a 5-shot group there, which must fall within half an inch from centre to centre, and I would certainly be happy to tackle live quarry out to that range and probably a little bit beyond with this setup. I am very impressed with this gun. It's solidly built, smooth to shoot and very accurate, and thanks to its Weihrauch pedigree it should deliver tip-top performance for a very long time. So if you want fixed barrel accuracy without the additional cost and hassle of the charging gear associated with a PCP, and a gun that looks a little bit different from the norm, then this one should certainly be on your list.
Look out for the new and improved Airgun Shooter magazine, packed full of technique, gear and insight from some of the best shooters in the industry. Brand new look and free video content. Pick up your copy today in stores or online.
That's all for this week, but we'll be back again in a fortnight. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And if you aren't already a member of the BASC, have a look at their website and check out the benefits you could be taking advantage of through Airgun membership.